And here's a problem that oftentimes, certainly in our culture, is that as being the disciple people in these situations, the one that go in those dark places with someone, we make the mistake in our society to think, okay, well, I'm here if you need me, And we aren't like what Jesus is calling. We aren't watching. We aren't approaching. We aren't praying. We aren't lifting people up. We're just saying, I'm available. And under our breath, we're thinking, boy, and I hope they don't ask for anything, because that's going to ruin my schedule. That's the temptation we give into. We should be in this room having a sense as we're listening to God of who in this room is needing to be lifted up in prayer right now. Who in this room do I need to walk up to and say, how you doing? I can just tell by your countenance that you're just not doing well. Or something might be up, or your heart seems heavy. How can I be lifting you up right now? Not settling for and you guys have heard it, I've said it from before, it takes 3 yeses before I finally tell you how I'm feeling. I mean, I'm like this, where, it's not easy for us to have people around. We want to go by ourselves. It's our feeling, our nature to do that. And we should be the persistent ones for others. When we're not in our gardens, our job is to go around with those who are in their dark places and saying, hey, I'm here for you. Let me watch and pray with you. Don't go there alone. Jesus didn't. Why should you? And I think this also, as we struggle with stuff, the other thing I would say to this and to the other side is this is an area where I think we drop the ball when we're in our garden Gethsemane moments, because we don't want other people to be in there with us. Maybe because we feel they'll hold us accountable. Maybe because we don't want to look weak. Maybe because we don't want to burden people. It could be all noble reasons. But we choose to be there alone. And God says that's not the way it's supposed to be. And we need to be able to allow people into our life in a moment where we can do that. Make sure there are people around you, certainly as you approach God and see what's happening. The other thing here, though, is when you're approaching God, Jesus models for us is that you go to God with honesty. Jesus is being honest here about his feelings to God. He's saying, I'm struggling with this. I mean, I know it was a great plan way back when and made sense, but as we're getting to this final hour, I'm thinking, oh man, God, is there any other way? I mean, Jesus describes it to a point. He says, I'm overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Other verses talk about he's sweating drops of blood. He's in such agony over this, of what is about to happen. He's asking God, I know we've talked about it, but one more time. Are you sure this is the only way? Just as an aside, when you have a friend who says, there's a lot of ways to heaven, your response could be, you know what? Jesus had that same question. He wrestled with it too. Isn't there another way? Let me show you. Come to Matthew 23 and say, okay, well, Jesus wrestled with that same question. What did he come up with? He said, God, is there any other way? There's got to be other ways to heaven than just this. And yet in the end, he realizes, no, there's not. This is the only way. There's your answer. If you want to give him a verse, this is a passage to do it. But Jesus was being honest in that moment of humanity and comforting his feelings. He was just expressing it. He recognized that my feelings are not in line with my beliefs, and I need to be honest with God about it. Sometimes we're not honest with God about it, and God is like, look, until you're honest about it, we're never going to deal with it. Oh no, I'm good. Oh yeah, it's just me and God. And when in fact, deep down, we really wrestle with it. Maybe we're afraid we're sinning, which I love, even like Scott said with Job. I mean, it's one of those things, and certainly with Jesus. I mean, if Jesus can go through that, then why can't we? We need to be honest with it. But also, Jesus was persistent about it. I mean, I love, the other thing about it is Jesus didn't say, okay, I prayed it once, that's it. Okay, it's done. But he went back. 3 times he kept going back and kind of wrestling through this thing with God and trying to figure out what he was struggling with. Sometimes, unanswered prayer is an invitation to keep asking. Sometimes when we're praying for God to be able to lift our spirit or to fix our situation or something like that, and it doesn't happen, it's not like, okay, I'm not allowed to come back and ask again. That's not at all true. The point of coming back is to continue to wrestle with it inside and go deeper, like in the case of Job, where you just continue with 3 people going back, and he's just wrestling with it, because in that moment you move from one place to another, from being able to just see to hear, or from hearing to see, and from, like the verse that Scott had shared, a deeper place in our life where we begin to really understand. God allows us to wrestle with things sometimes so we can truly move to a new place in that relationship with Him, and to be able to kind of discern what God's will is. Sometimes it's with the others. Through that process of discerning, we discover things as we go through it. But persistence is an important part of what we see in here as we wrestle with God through what we're feeling. And prayer, through honesty and persistence, is that way of moving us to be in line with God's will. And so, we pray that we can commune with God and see His presence. He's there, but see His presence in our life. And we pray that God will guide us into His will as we're trying to discern what His will is, and trying to make that decision and come to a place of kind of peace about that decision is what we wrestle through. But all of that is in a place of honesty. God so wants us to be honest with Him. Certainly within a church, but in our personal time with Him and with others around us, we got to be honest. That's when healing comes through on the other side of honesty. But then we see too, though, so Jesus is certainly, He's got others with Him in this context, but He's really honest about what's going on. But He also goes to God with trust. He talks, you can tell in Jesus, He continually says, "Not my will, but yours be done." And Jesus is really trusting in a perfect plan that God has. And believing that, God sees the big picture here. I don't. And when we wrestle with that, we say, I see what I want and what I think I need, God, but I've got to step back and say, but I got to trust You have a perfect plan of who You are, and you're always willing to do what's best. And I have to allow that You have that big picture. And even if You don't do what I ask, what does happen is best. And so I trust You. And so He trusts in a perfect plan, but He also trusts, in His provision. You don't see it as well in Matthew. Doesn't really go into it. But if you jumped over to Luke 22, you can look at that later on. But Luke really has a great way. Luke says this in verse 22 and 43. After Jesus has been praying like this, in verse 43 it says, "An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him." I don't know why Matthew didn't include that. That's a great, little point of observation. That in that moment of darkness and despair, that God, the question would be, and in your take home it talks about, did God answer or hear Jesus' prayer? Well, He did. And He answered it, and certainly in saying, there is no other way. You've got to drink this cup. But He also answered by providing and giving Jesus what He needed, strengthening Him in that moment to be able to carry through and to carry on through it. And He does the same with us. When we are in those situations of darkness and struggling with what our God's will is, or struggling whether we do the right thing or we don't, the promise of God is He will provide. We just need to be attentive to the way in which God provides. He provides through the comfort and strength of the people around us who lift us up when we bring them into the peace. He provides for giving us a sense of peace and honesty. If you've ever, hopefully you've experienced it, where you kind of confess to God what you're struggling with. I don't know about you, but for me, it's like a lightening of the load of my life. It might not last very long because I might carry the load back or take it back, but there's a moment where you're just saying real to God that you can almost sense God just lifting you up and saying, I'll carry that. Hand that over to me. Let me carry that load, and you relax. And God provides in those ways when we're able to really trust Him. Trust, think of it this way, trust is kind of the nail you can hang your faith on. That when you wrestle with these things in life, if you always lean and hold on to trust, everything will be okay. Maybe like in the case of real estate, my financial my financial life will go in the toilet, but my marriage and my family was better, and that's what really mattered. And everything can be okay. Maybe there's moments in life where you'll forgive someone and you'll go ahead and let it go, and then they're going to do it right back at you. But you've kind of given over responsibility trying to control someone, and there's a belief that, God is working in this better than me, and everything's going to be okay. Uncertainty of the future, fear of the future, certainly in health reasons that you might have. Some of the prayer issues that we have this week regarding surgeries and stuff. There's many of reasons in there to be able to wrestle and have a dark place in your life of a fear of what might happen, because we just think of the worst case scenario in our life. And yet we know the promises of God that says, look, the greatest place that you can be is standing in my presence and experiencing me literally. Paul talked about it. He says, I long to be with you in heaven forever. That's a moment that for all of us, there's nothing greater than that. That's your worst case scenario as a Christian. I'm just laying it real. That's the worst case scenario. Now, I understand the emotional side of letting go of this place. And certainly God says, but that's not, there's so much more that needs to be happened. The point is that we can let go and trust God. When we trust Him enough, we can let go and know that, what God is going to do is going to be best. It's okay. It'll be okay. He loves me that much where He says, I will not let anything bad happen to you in the terms of the way that He sees it. I will give you what you need. I will strengthen you. I will provide. I will love you beyond. Nothing that happens can ever tear that love away from you. And as a perfect Father, I will always do what's best. Those are the promises that we can hold on to, when we're hanging our trust and our faith in God. I don't know the depth of your struggle right now, but you do. And Jesus knows too. And that's the message of the story, certainly, for us to be able to understand. No matter what our struggle is, there's a path through it. Jesus has gone through that path probably deeper than anything we've done. I'm just guessing. I don't know if anybody here's had a crucifixion experience, but, given what He was facing, whatever you have, it's a few bars, down the road of the level of sorrow. And so that makes it more comforting, because we know that Jesus understands even deeper than we do what we're going through. And He knows the path that's going through it. And His promise, of course, is to certainly go through it with us. But also to not do it just you and Him, but to be able to have a community around us. That's so important, to be able to bring that community around us, to be able to be honest to God and to others in our struggle and where we're at, and then to trust God enough to know that He's going to work through our feelings and help bring those things in line with our beliefs, and we can walk forward in faith and trust in God. I know that He will do it best. It's best. Excuse me. Jesus offers us a path through our pain when we put our faith in Him. Who are the people that you have in your life? The ones that you invite into that garden. And for those of you who are the ones that aren't in the garden, who are the ones around you that you need to offer yourself to be ones to go? If you have to be engaged with other people's lives to be able to know that, they're not going to invite strangers into their garden with them. What area of your life do you need to be completely honest with God? The story focuses a lot of choosing, to continue down the path of the right way. But for a lot of us, we've been down a path the wrong way. And our wrestling with, is this the moment where I need to let go of what my control and continue to go this way and just kind of hand it over to God and say, okay, I'm willing to change path and go the other. That was more my situation.